So, technical difficulties. You know, the nice thing about a tech presentation is that I like to see things work. I'm not just a guy to do a slideshow, right? Anybody can do slideshows and talk cool slides. But to have stuff working, whether it's smoke and mirrors or not, it really doesn't matter, right? It's still kind of cool to see. Well, but you know, sometimes the stuff doesn't work. So, trying to get stuff working while I talk also. Which will probably present its own set of challenges because those somehow I didn't plan for this, right? What's this nonsense? So the presentation that I want to do, or at least, at worst case, you get a slideshow. Okay, best case, you get to see smoke, you get to see real stuff. Okay, but I've got stuff. I got switch, I got phones, I got computers. I need a server. Actually, I need 2 servers, and that computer is like just really giving me a lot of grief. You know, it's been working fine for a year, no problems. You travel with it, and there you go. But
Windows.
Then I call the desktop support place. Okay, so my presentation is probably a little bit different than some of the others that we have this week. This is kind of a real-world mode of network access security. What does that mean? And it's broke. Now what? Well, we're always going to blame somebody else because the network is never down, am I right?
Exactly.
Oh, come on. The network is never down, am I right? Unless you're a server guy, storage guy, desktop guy, phone guy, or gal, okay, right, either one. All right, but if you're network guys, the network never goes down. And if everyone blames the network, we're certainly going to go look for other things to blame. But what's at the end of the day, especially for this week, what is the absolute known fact? It's Laura's mantra. The packets don't lie. Right? At the end of the day, the packets don't lie.
But you can lie in the packet.
Say again?
You can lie in the packet. There's packet prints.
The packets don't lie, though, right?
No.
Whatever's in the packet, that's right. Whatever's in the packet may not be absolutely correct, but the packet doesn't lie, right? Whatever's running on the wire, it doesn't lie. It may be the interpretation of what it's doing. It could be incorrect data. And actually, we're going to see a little bit of that because this particular topic, it encompasses just about every support component within an organization. I've got desktop issues. I've got network issues. I've got server issues. I have voice issues. Okay? If there's a group that even deals with the layer 1, it may deal with that. So we've got a lot of disciplines. Network access security, this particular presentation is all about 802.1x. How many run 802.1x on their networks now? Okay. How many read about 802.1x? How many know it's just another one of those IEEE 802 somethings? All right. And that's about what it is, right? It's another, either in our case it is IEEE, but it's one of those other standards things. It's another acronym. It's what we love to throw at sales folks, and no offense to management sales folks, right? But, those are some of the things that we can throw and say, hey, here's the deal. So that's kind of one of the things. We talk about a lot of this. The understanding of network access security is basically, I need to lock down my network. So let me ask you this, a couple series of questions. In your network, or somebody you know network, if you walk over to an open RJ45 and you plug in, would you get a live network connection? Okay, I'll back up and say, well, the Ethernet card energized. Yes? Oh, come on. Give me some real hands. All right? If the port comes live, the lights go green, orange, red, amber, or whatever other, yellow, whatever other color, will you get an IP address? Okay, come on, raise the hands. We're all friends here. We all know it's happening, right? This is all good and wonderful. All right? All that is a bonus to the bad folks. And getting an Ethernet address just saves them 15 seconds. Okay? Because otherwise, they're just going to sit there, snip the wire, get some broadcasts, find out what's going on, and they can hard code in an IP address. Okay, but get an IP address, well, that makes it easy for the offending device to cause grief, mayhem on the network, and or steal data, right? At least that's what everybody kind of thinks. So I'm going to spend a bit of time kind of going through what this technology is, what it takes to make it work. Because in this process, it will show you how many different things get touched and how many places this can break down. In this case, I'm blaming the server team right now, all right? But unfortunately, it's Jeff and Amir, the server guy, the voice guy, the data guy, and the network guy, and the cable guy. You know, oops, I'm all of those. So that's part of it. This thing keeps trying to move up. So we'll talk about what this network access security is all about, and talk about with those what are the potential problems, why we're even talking about this whole concept, how you make it work, how you can do to enhance it, and I'm truly hoping to show that I can make it work. Okay, and then I'm going to show you all, at least maybe not all, but I'm going to show you all various places that you can potentially have to go deal with troubleshooting. Because this is an example with all these disciplines being involved in this project. What is somebody going to do when the finger gets pointed at them? They're going to point to somewhere else, right? As long as it's back out somewhere else, they don't care. All right? So this is one of those where everybody has to play nicely. And this happens in all organizations. Don't all the support teams and engineering teams, don't they all play nice together? Right. And we're living in fantasy land, right? We had ice cream for lunch dessert today, right? It's just not always that way. Sometimes you get some of the groups in the room, and they're not fighting them because there's somebody else, boss or a boss is around. That's the only reason why they're not fighting about it. So, the concept of network access security is we need to lock down these ports. So let me ask another question. How many people have all available switch ports disabled or in no-shut state by default? Okay, raise your hand proudly. Stand up. Clap for them. All right? Except for the fact somebody moves opposites. Oh, now you got to go turn on the port. And they, of course, gave us fair warning that this was going to happen. My favorite, corporate real estate goes in and they move a whole batch of people from one area that was working to another area that's been dark for 6 months. Everybody comes in Monday morning, hits the button on the computer, nothing happens, network's down. Yes, it's supposed to be down. What are you doing there? And 59 of their other friends are calling on the, oh, wait, it's voice over IP. No calls. Woo! Right? Bonus! Snaps for the network, guys. Security's working. Except everybody's mad. Right? But the bottom line is, hey, you don't tell us it's not our fault. But how many organizations, the ports are live, right? If they were live by default on the switch, they're still live if you patch them in. So that becomes an issue. All ports should be locked down. Now my next favorite, how many people have shared printers in open spaces? Come on, raise your hands proudly, right? And that network jack is locked down to that printer's MAC address so no other device can talk on it, correct?
Right.
Come on, raise your hands, this is good stuff. Oh, but where's the MAC address on the printer? It's on the back, or I can print out the setup page, and I'm a bad person. I'm like, woohoo, there's a network jack, it's live. I'm just going to go find the MAC address, I'm going to spoof it on my device, and plug the printer, plug this in, we're up. Right? So again, it's an open port. MAC address security is a 25-second stop. Okay? Because I got to find the MAC address of the printer now. Right? It may not be on the back, or it may not be easy to get to without kind of sort of being noticed. So I just walk up and press whatever commands I need to, get the setup page, find the MAC address, walk over with my laptop, spoof the back, I'm in. Right? And I'm standing next to a printer and nobody really is going to say anything. Now, if I got the laptop on top of it, that's bad. Right? But, you look like a support person, it doesn't matter. So, open ports may not just be that jack on the wall that's right open. Okay? It's any accessible network port. So one of the things we want to do is be able to come up with authenticating users and or devices onto the network. Whether it's a printer, whether it's an access point, how many people have their Cat5 cables hooked up on their access point and within close proximity plugged in right there to the jack? Come on, raise them up if your access point's available. So all I got to do is get my chair, walk over here, plug up a cable, come down, and now I'm live on the network. Right? Nobody's ever seen this before? How many of us use those? I need a jack. Here's the area. Woohoo! Right? The network's problem, they don't need wireless. Right? And right now, if the network's down, everything else doesn't matter. I need on the network. I've got to make it work. So we want to authenticate every single jack. Maybe not in the data center or the computer center or whatever you want to call the room. Right? The room that has limited access. Nobody but the closest IT personnel and the custodial staff, maybe not them, but nobody else really has the key. We may not worry so much about those. We're talking about all other open jacks. Anybody that has a key past you, or your close circle team. There's another component we might want to add into this to say, well, authenticating a user ID and password is fine. What about devices that can't do that? Printers, right? You can authenticate a printer with its MAC address. Hello, where's the MAC address? Easily available. All right, so that may not be as good. Any kind of a device that you can't load up a particular software application to be able to put in a user ID and password and set of credentials is a potential compromise point. So one of the things that we may want to do is be able to add in another layer of an enhanced policy decision. You have to be this user at this place, at this time, at this part of the network, and you get this level of access. All right? So that's another component. Well, as in everything in life, one more layer adds one more what? Complexity, failure point, everything else that goes along with it. You can also add in things like the network access control, network access protection, whatever the acronym of the day, week, month, year is, okay? And that potentially can give you things like the endpoint integrity test. Okay, now I'm going to authenticate to the network, but my computer needs to be tested. Does it have the right virus updates? Is it running the proxy settings? Is it running this? Is it running all the patches? Oh, wait a minute. No. I don't care about your credentials. Bad device. We're going to throw you off somewhere else. We're going to update you. We're going to make sure you're okay. And then we'll let you into the network to play nicely. So, another layer. Right? So I'm going to kind of go through what all these look like and what all these pieces are, what all they provide to here. I'm still trying to get this over. So if there's open ports, we want to lock them down. We want to deal with that in whatever mode. The attacks may not be what I would call deliberate. How many people have portable computing devices in the companies? Not including us, of course, right? How many of your users have laptops, right? Or iPads or iWhat's, anything that connects into the network, right? They take it somewhere else. It gets compromised out of your control. It brings it back into the network. They log in, life is good, and then they infect your network. Oops, right? I remember I'm a really old fart in this business, okay? So I remember the take the floppies home, bring the floppies back infected days, right? Now what is it that you take home and they come back infected?
Flash drive.
The flash drives, right? So we take this home, it passed all the corporate standards, except it walked out the door. Oops. So these are some of the things that we're kind of dealing with. Some of these solutions can help mitigate, maybe not stop, but at least minimize the amount of issues that they cause with network. Some are going to be malicious, but the bottom line is we're worried about inside the network. How many people have outward access to the network, internet, locked down, right? You got a firewall. Or you got some sort of rule-capable device, right? Router with ACL, some kind of firewall. Nobody thinks about the inside of the network. You come in our doors. Life is good. How many have wireless in your networks? Come on, raise them up. And how many think that the wireless stops at the wall? The RF, right? Or, okay, fine, it stops at the property line, right? The sales folks do. Again, sorry, I've always been on the tech side, so I kind of pick on the sales folks, but I don't mean any real offense. Without sales folks, they wouldn't need us. Without us, we wouldn't need sales. We have to have sales folks to sell the cool stuff we do. So we're worried about all that kind of access into the network that we might be dealing with from whatever type of attack. Inside deliberate, inside accidental. Okay, any of those. So if we want to lock down the ports, life is good. We've got to have a way of somebody getting onto the network. We've got to have some sort of an authentication capability. We may want them to manually enter a user ID and password. How many of your users would suffer through a computer user ID and password and a network separate login user ID and password? Not. Right? It's bad enough they have to change a password every 30 days. Right? Or whatever your password change rules, and or you've got into the new complexity. 15 digits, upper, lower case, can start only this way, has to have that way. And where's the password? On the desk, in the drawer, on the file. You look for the post-it with the lines through things, and the last one. That's a password, right? It may not be obviously available, but it's going to be close by. My favorite, it's in a locked desk drawer. Well, do you lock it? On Friday nights, I do. On Monday through Friday. On Friday nights, I do. Excellent. We might have to deal with those kinds of things. So a lot of users aren't going to deal with multiple logins, right? Or you give them a key, right? They got to read the little code. They got 30 seconds to do it. It's Monday morning. They're trying to focus in on that, trying to type. Oh man, I missed it, right? So token, that's just kind of part of life. What we may want to do with like single sign-on. They log into their laptop, they can get access into the network. Everything on the network needs to be authenticated. It doesn't matter what it is. If it plugs into an Ethernet connection, it needs to authenticate. Phones, switches, surveillance cameras, all right? Anything that somebody can get their hands on that Cat5 cable needs to have an authentication into the network somehow, some way. And it gets very, very challenging trying to make this. Because the bottom line is, right, security is only good as its weakest link. And if somebody can see a Cat5 cable, but you think, but it's 10 feet on the air. Can they get to that cable? Right? Can they pop ceiling tiles and look around and, oh, there's an access point, right? Now this assumes probably late night activities and they're walking around with a ladder. Okay, now there's a whole nother thing that has to occur, right? There's a layer 1 or layer 0 of security. How do they get in? But you know what? It doesn't matter. If the network can be at rest, it's our job to secure the network down. So every device on the network has to authenticate. We do it with a standard called the IEEE 802.1x. It requires a whole slew of things to make it work. Bringing in voice phones can be a little challenging because from every vendor there's only a few phones that support this particular capability. And in their support, it's sometimes fairly minimal as to what they can do. So there's a little bit of challenge. How many run VoIP in their networks? Okay, how many have the computers connected to the phone into the network? Oh, there's 2 things on the wire. Oh, isn't that fun, right? And then you have to either tag or trunk the port for the phone, you tag or access or untag it for the computer. Well, you got a wrist point there, right? I can unplug the computer from my phone here, got the orange cable, and now I can plug it into my device, right? Well, the phone's not going to authenticate me. No, I have to do authentication back here at the switch for the phone and also one for this device. Well, it'd probably be a good idea to at least limit that port on the switch to maybe 2 devices, the phone and a computer, and authenticate it. How many devices can you normally plug up into one switch port with something else hanging out here? How many you got? Right? Bunches, up to the MAC address limit of the switch. We're talking way more than you're going to ever have to deal with. And then there's some extra functionality in this whole authentication system where I can say, oh, Jeff, you're part of engineering. I'm authenticating. This is all this stuff happening in the Magic server area. Oh, look, engineering. Well, engineering should be part of VLAN 10. So as part of this functionality, I can pass the information down to the switch that says, yeah, Jeff coming in this port is good. Put that port in VLAN 10 now. And then somebody else comes over and plugs into this, and it's Joe Sayers guy. Okay? Joe needs to be in the sales VLAN, right? We give him access to the internet and to print. Okay, maybe mail server. All right? That would be VLAN 20. Joe logs in. Where was my port before? It was in VLAN 10. As soon as I disconnected or logged out, the port went back to a dead VLAN, no access whatsoever. Joe plugs in, logged in, and now I can tell the switch, put that port in VLAN 20. We have some similar things with phones. Phones by default have to have that tag or trunk configuration, right? The standard didn't initially deal with that, so we have this little RFC add-on that can be done. This is stuff that it just comes out the more you look at these projects, and everybody's kind of going, I thought I could just buy this and turn it on. Well, the answer is kind of sort of yeah, but there's a lot of things, okay? So this is, again, a lot of extra information. So what do you need with this 802.1x stuff? You need software on the client. You need switches that support this feature. You need a radius server, whatever radius flavor you want. Open radius, free radius, Microsoft's radius, Cisco's radius, your own radius. It doesn't matter. As long as you support the standard radius RFCs, it will work. Asterisk, caveat, it should, right? In our business, never say never, never say always, because you're always never right. You're never always right. That's what you're going to do. All right? But this is a have to. You want to make this work? This is a have to. You got to have the radius server. the piece on the computer has got to be able to speak without a protocol yet. If you haven't authenticated the network, you can't get on a protocol yet. So we have to speak a layer 2 protocol. That's what this little software piece of it is, going to speak the extensible authentication protocol over a LAN. So you got to have a server, you got to have a component at the client device, you got to have a switch that supports it, and generally, for the most part, you get all these things today, right? Most off-the-shelf products today, upper SMB to enterprise class devices, from a switch perspective, support it. The servers support it, and most of the client OSs, from Windows XP, Service Pack 1 and above, support it natively. So we get that all those various capabilities. I talked about the one with the radio server. You can tune it to say, look, put this user's port into this particular VLAN at this moment in time. How many don't have that feature now? You have to hard code those ports to the VLAN for that entity. How many people have multiple VLANs for the different teams, different groups? How many run just a VLAN, a user VLAN? And printers and computers and everything pretty much is on. This gives us not necessarily another layer of security, but another layer of control. And it could be loosely put into a security model as part of an overall security plan. And it's because it's a standard, it works, quote unquote, across everybody who supports 802.11. So it doesn't matter the client OS, doesn't matter the switch platform, doesn't matter whatever radio server you're using, it should work, right? Because it is based on a standard. So here's my base pieces. I've got a radio server. Oh, I need a user database somewhere. It can either be built into the radio server, or like in the case of Microsoft's, you would use Active Directory with their radio services. You need a switch that supports it. Whoops, sorry. I need devices that support it. So if I've got a phone, it would need to support it. If I've got an access point, I want it to support it as well. Some type of devices. Different radiuses. Just about all radiuses will work with this. So we'll kind of go through that. The authenticator, that's the piece that's basically the traffic cop. You don't get past me, if I'm a switch or an access point, until somebody behind me, the authenticator, tells me to let you through. I've got a big trap door right here, right behind these connectors, okay? That's the only thing I'm going to let squeak through that trap door is like a little slide bar password, right? Little EDIs coming through. It's going to let that little bit of a protocol, that EAT protocol, pass through. Deal with the speak, and then if the server says good to go, I bring up the trap door and life is good. I get some sort of an access at that point. So I have to have those kind of products. Your off-the-shelf $20 switches don't do this. Okay? So if your network is comprised of that, you can stop right here. You're going to have to buy more stuff. It's a good day. More stuff is always better. The supplicant is the piece of software at the client. It's got to speak EAT. Okay? The generic term is the supplicant. So whatever devices that you're going to plug in your network, you either have to have it or you've got to go to plan B. Most of the current OSs today have it built in as an option. You have to enable it, but it's got it. There are third-party ones that are out there. Some phones, this particular Mitel phone's got a built-in supplicant. So I can actually give it a user ID and password. This Astra phone doesn't. It's just a device with a MAC address in it, right? But I can authenticate it based on that MAC address as an option. I can do the same thing with printers. But most network printers, especially the mid-upper class type network printers today, have that supplicant software that can be enabled for all this. There's kind of a key thing to note. Like everything else in our business, there's never just one of anything, right? Yeah, there's EAT. How many flavors of EAT? MD5, TLS, TTLS, PEAT, LEAP. Right? And the list goes on and on. So whatever I'm going to use on my client, my server has to support it. So this is where it becomes really interesting. I've got a server team that says, I've got Microsoft Windows 2008 with their radio services now known as NPS. It's in the Network Policy Server portfolio. All right? It supports PEAT, TLS, and TTLS. Well, my phone supports MD5. Radio team says, no, we don't have MD5. Well, guess what? You actually can. Microsoft turned it off. You have to go in and do a reg edit. You can turn MD5 back on. right? Or you have a security group that says, no, we got to use certificates everywhere. You're not going to get a certificate on a phone. At least not most phones today. So then you got to go back to voice guys. Voice guys, we need phones. Well, no, we just bought the big budget of phones. We've been buying phones for 10 years, right? Oops. So you got to deal with some of these things. There's just a lot of different components that you go with. Some of the geek type, not an exhaustive list on any of these things. Okay? Just kind of an awareness piece. Here's the stuff that gets kind of interesting. What's the communications flow? We had in our session earlier, or this morning, you need to know what the network looks like first, right, before you can troubleshoot. So how many have good traces of their networks? And how many have lots of traces of their networks not so good? Right? And generally that's the way we're coming in. Or, oh, this application isn't working. And you get, where did this come from? Oh, we threw it on over the weekend. What? What's it supposed to look like? Not like this. Oops. Well, for making 802.11x work, the handshaking that happens between these three primary components, the supplicant, the authenticator, and the authentication server, here's kind of what happens. Here's who talks to who. When the big trap door is down in front of that port, the client can only talk to the switch. That switch will not pass that packet through, period, end of story. Now, when I've been prompted to say, who am I as a client by the switch, all right, the switch will repackage that request and send it embedded in a request message over to the authenticator, to the server. The authenticator will say, who are you? You know, prove it. I'm Jeff. So he says, prove it. The switch says, prove it. I get back a password. The switch repackages it, sends it to the server. The server says, oh, goes over, looks at the database, Jeff, password. Hey, that's a good password. Radio says, good to go. Switch says, woohoo, welcome aboard. And lifts up the trap door. Right? Oh, now what happens? What's been going on that client computer this whole time? If it's a DHCP world. Right? Is it? Hello, I need an address. Hello, I need an address. Come on, McFly, I need an address. Right? And finally, when that door comes up and that DHCP request goes through, I got an address, I'm on the network, it's a beautiful day, the clouds are clear, the birds are chirping, right? We're having great fun with this. If you don't know where to look in here, right, just like in our sessions most of the day, if I'm capturing over here on the server side, I'm not going to see some of this handshaking between the switch and the client. If I'm capturing over here, I'm not going to see what's happening between the switch and the server. I got to capture both places if I'm having problems. At a minimum, right, to see what's going on. So, knowing this is one of those slides, if you ever get an 802.11x, keep this handy the first time things aren't working. This is going to help prove where the problem exists. At least it's going to tell you which half. Client to switch, switch to server. Where do we go to look next? Right? If I'm missing a piece of the transaction here, this is going to knock out 50% of my troubleshooting points right away. And I'm either going to be able to say, client team, somebody forgot to turn on the supplicant, if I don't ever see this identity response packet. If I see all of that, but I get over here and I don't see anything going from the switch to the radio server, network team, you forgot to tell the switch who the server is. Okay? If I get over here to the server and I never see a response challenge coming out, I come over and look at this guy. It could be varying things, okay? But it's typically some sort of policy configuration on the radio server. Somebody forgot a policy configure point. And it could depend on what the message is. It could just come back with a fail. Well, why did it fail? This is where the packets don't necessarily help you. You kind of have to know a little bit more of what's going on. And the error messages from the servers don't always exactly tell you where to go next, right? Quite often it's just, it's not my fault, right? Not my piece of the world's fault. It could just be bad credentials. It could be a bad configuration with the client. It could be a bad configuration on the radius policies. Again, this is what I was saying, is we can't tell everything, but we can tell a fair amount of what's going on. So this is what I alluded to a while ago. The switch, when it's configured for an 802.11x functionality, and it's a port-by-port choice. It's not an all or none. I can roll this out one port at a time. All right? So it makes it nice. As soon as I put that port into this authentication function state, by default, anything that plugs into that port the port's in an unauthorized state. And the only thing, again, that I will allow traffic to is that little bit of a layer 2 protocol to come through, by default. Now again, this is one of those, there are exceptions to the rule, okay, but you have to configure that. But by default, the switch is only going to let a little bit of traffic sweep through only for an authorization function. When life is good, the switch has been told otherwise, we go into this authorized state, the trap door comes up, and we allow regular communications can occur at that point. And there's some other things that we can do with those other policy systems. But right now, this is just the basics. Click. The VLAN assignments, this is one of the things I talked about. This is a great, cool tool, because when they move all those people from one part of the network to another part of the network, I just bring the ports up, they're in 802.1x, and the switch is told where to put those ports, what VLAN to put them in, based on how I've got my radius policies configured. So I don't have to go in there and move all those ports into various VLANs for different user types. And I can do this for all different kind of devices. I can have a camera VLAN for surveillance. I can have an access point VLAN for that wireless functionality. I have a printer VLAN. I can have user VLANs. I can go VLAN happy crazy, right? And I'm kind of a lots of VLANs guy. Right? I like to sub-compartmentalize things as best as possible. It's really easy to shut down a small segment of a network by VLAN, if I need to, rather than, oh no, I got to bring down half the network and they're all one VLAN. So, some nice, cool things. I don't have to do that. That's a choice. I could just simply say, from a switch perspective, radius told me it's good to go. I just open up the port to a specific configured VLAN known as the authorized VLAN. Or I can just say, you know what? I don't care. The port goes open. We'll just let it go for the VLAN that's statically configured for it. Now, one interesting thing is, if radius says everything is good to go, we approve. Switch, go for it. And I want to put that user in VLAN 11. If the switch looks through its configuration, doesn't find VLAN 11, it doesn't pick up and roll over and die. It just says, port's locked. It doesn't matter that everything else was good. I don't have that VLAN configured. I'm not putting that port in any function state. It'll go into an unauthorized state. So I've got a little extra security. If somebody misconfigured a rule somewhere upstream from back at the server level. So we have a little bit of protection. Sometimes the good news and bad news. Again, the packet says, from radius, access accept. Here's the VLAN ID switch. The switch doesn't open up the port. Then you got to correlate them. Which VLAN did you tell me to put it in? And when you go ask the server team, we'll get back to you in 48 hours with that configuration, right? I got the trace. I can see what VLAN they're telling me, and I can find out that it was the wrong VLAN. Or I didn't get the switch configured. Oops, I need to put VLAN 11 on. The voice support for the 802.1x. Again, almost every VoIP manufacturer supports it, but not across all their lines. It's only a few phones within their line. So you got to look at that in part of this overall scheme. Going to an 802.1x environment after the entire infrastructure of everything is blocked, it's very, very challenging because you're going to find all kinds of parts and pieces that don't support it, and then you're going to figure out ways to get around it. And that really skews security policies. It really messes up the security teams. Absolute, this is the way things will be done. Who's going to spin them? Who's funding that change, right? The next thing you know, you see security say, well, we'll grandfather in these things, right? But they've got to be changed in X amount of time. We're not funding for that next amount of time. Our phone's working just fine. Not our problem. You can't, told us this back when we did the phone RFP. Anyway, that becomes a layer of 8, 9, and 10 issue. All right, political, more political, really political. And we're all very happy just playing down here. Just don't be a bunch of stuff. Put me in a room. Don't be letting me every so often. Just tell me what you want done, boss. I'll do it. Right? Don't everybody likes to play it or something like that. Take a big wad of money to go with it. Right? More toys. So in getting some of these enhancements to make phones work is challenging, and then to make it also where I want this phone to authenticate, but I want to put it today in VLAN 200. I want to put it tomorrow in VLAN 20. Without support for this particular RFC, we can't do that because the original standard didn't have the capability of radius telling the switch to put the port in either a trunk or tag state. They just said everything's good to go. So they wrote the additional RFC to support that. So it's another one of those challenges. The only radius that I found that supports this today is free radius 2.0, and I think what's some of our Juniper? Steel belted radius supports it. Microsoft's MPS doesn't, although somebody told me you can hard code it in or manually code it in. You have to go edit an XML file. Anyway, it's another one of those things. Oh, I want to do all this cool stuff. You have everything you need to make this happen. The enhanced policy decisions. This is where it gets to be really fun. Just having the right credentials doesn't make it work. I got to be in the right place at the right time in the network. There's no reason a salesperson should be in the warehouse on the network accessing the sales database information necessarily. That may be a rule that I want to have. So salesperson logs in, you've got a policy system that goes, oh, wait a minute, you're on this port and this switch, that's known as the warehouse. No. No, I'll give you access to the intranet, and only in the intranet, mail server, and maybe a few other things. You don't get access to the cool stuff. It could be a policy. Or engineering is locked down very tightly. Only engineering resources can be accessed in the engineering spaces, the engineering parts of the network. So this is some really fun stuff that you can play with. And again, it really involves a lot of look and feel because we don't typically think about network access in this particular manner. If you've got an employee ID, you're a bona fide employee of the company, you've signed all the things, you got a key to get in, you want to be able to go anywhere you want. Well, that was, so pre-2000, so last century. We have to really think a little bit more granular on our security. Like, no, we really need to lock this network down much tighter than we've ever thought about before. So policy decision can give you some good things. Now, the good news is there's a lot of systems out there. The not so good news is there's not an absolute single standard, but most everybody has gone to the TCG format. So this is one of those eye chart slides that kind of compares the standard with the Microsoft way. They kind of blended themselves to follow the basic standard. Just another chart to kind of look at. But now there's more components I have to deal with it here. I still have to have the authentication piece, but I want to kind of tangent off of that to make sure, okay, before Radius can tell the switch is good, we got to make sure that everything else is in line. So that's kind of what this does. This gives you a kind of a configuration. I got a faculty user coming in, and if I'm in the classroom between these hours, and I'm on my assigned computer, and I'm also doing endpoint integrity and got all the latest definitions, then the profile says put that port in VLAN 20 and give them access. Apply some dynamic ACLs to that port that says the faculty in VLAN 20 can only get access to those two systems. If it's, however, a faculty user logged into the cafeteria, anytime I don't care, still on their computer, still passing endpoint integrity, instead I'll put them in VLAN 30 and I'm going to limit them to where they cannot get to the normal faculty systems. I can't let them get into the grade reporting system so they can bring up other data and have a potential data privacy compromise issue. So that's one of the nice things about these kind of systems. That's the good news. The bad news is troubleshooting this is even more fun, right? Because now, wait a minute, where do you mean? Where did it not work? Well, I was over in the cafeteria during lunch. Well, where do you know? Well, I'm at my desk. Is it working? Yes, thank you, bye. Right? We don't give them time to say anything else. But it did work. Is it working now? Yeah, bye. Ticket closed, right? Call me from the cafeteria when it doesn't work, right? I can't troubleshoot this when you're down in your classroom. It's working fine. Yeah, bye. Ticket closed. Right? There are measurements on closing tickets, yes, in some regards, right? Now, maybe they should be done correctly, but we won't even get into that in everything kind of tip. So anyway, here's some things that can be thought about. This is really cool because all the rest of the 802.1x functionality before this policy-based system is the same. The very last bit is that there's something typically in the Radius server that after Radius says good to go, you've got the policy decision system that says, okay, now look at all these rule sets. We're going to modify that outbound packet that Radius was going to send. This server in this little application snatches that Radius access accept packet and says, wait a minute, I've got to look at this and make sure everything's good to go. Oh, look, you said VLAN 10. No, that's a faculty in the classroom. I'm going to put it in VLAN 20. So it modifies that packet, sends it out. Now, if this was all in one machine, this is even more difficult to troubleshoot because we can't grab any packets between these 2 points. Somebody's got to be looking in the server configurations, the application configurations. But if it doesn't work out here, who is at fault? The network. And the network guys, you know what? It's not my fault. I plug in devices, I can ping from point A to point B, it's a good day, ticket closed. not. We have to prove it's not our fault, right? Packets don't lie, right? If I see what my packets are, it's like, well, the credentials are good, we know this, but they're not going to the right place. That's not a network outage issue, right? That's not plugged in the wrong port. There's a policy somewhere. We got to have the trace that says, what? It's ain't good to go. I can't help it if the policy doesn't match. Well, we still have to deal with that. Oh, getting really close to this thing still. The network access protection and control is one of those things that is typically thinking about the endpoint integrity. Anybody doing this kind of stuff now in their networks, endpoint integrity? The same guys are doing already way cool stuff, right? Fun, isn't it? Yeah, it was great in the lab. How many in the lab session? Worked just fine in the lab. Oh, what? You want to roll this out 10,000 devices at once? No. We'll be a little pushback on it. Let's do a couple of dozen, right? Let's ease into this to make sure it works, right? But that's going to take 2 years. Let's ease into this to make sure it works, right? We don't roll out a big batch. So there's all kinds of good things about it. You may have a system that includes 802.1x support for this. There are different ways of doing some of this stuff, okay? There's different component client pieces of software where they could be dynamically testing, inline testing. You have to load something on there, all kinds of ways. Are you going to install this where you test just as an inline? I don't care about authentication, but I really want to make sure endpoint integrity is good. Am I going to capture something in the middle of a DHCP request to do this functionality, or am I going to do it with an 802.1x environment? Basically options in just about all of the major NAC solutions. So here's our easiest one, right? All the traffic that I have to verify that this client is good has got to come through my server first. It's a great model, except the network guys have no control, right? We can't do anything except look at the packets kind of back and forth here. That's all we can do. But it's a very easy to integrate model, although it doesn't scale very well if I need this to support lots and lots of VLANs for my users, right? Something else that has to be thought of and perhaps dealt with. If I'm going to do a DHCP inline support, where I say, wait a minute, I'm going to grab that DHCP request, I'm going to give them, I'm going to give them a special IP and a special VLAN, a quarantine VLAN. I'll put them on over, verify life's good, fix them if they're not, and then I'll give them a real, let the DHCP request go up to the real DHCP server. Good, functional, but again, it potentially has a scaling issue if I'm dealing with thousands and thousands and thousands of devices, right? Just maybe not enough horsepower to deal with it. Or I can do the 802.1x functionality with this and basically say, well, we'll look at credentials perhaps, and or we may look at the agent support, but we'll keep it in a protected VLAN to make this happen. Well, we'll want to verify credentials, and then we'll want to verify endpoint integrity, which is a little bit more common. But we still have all the control points happening at the switch, being told what to do between Radius or the NAC server, NAC server. They tell the switch, open the door for a quarantine VLAN, open the door for remediation VLAN, open the door for the usage, for the particular user VLAN is needed. This is where it gets probably about the most challenging, because how many different points can this break down? Way more than there are lines connecting things, right? We've got all kinds of people involved in this policy, decision system. Right? All different disciplines have to come together and have some sort of agreements on what's going to happen. And when it doesn't work, it's always right here. I hit the enter key, I gave it my password, it didn't let me on. The network is down. Right? The classic story. That's just the way it is. So lots of places it can break down. And then we have to start looking at this and think, well, where do you start? Get a trace. Right? That's the theme this week. Anyway, get a trace. Where are you going to get a trace? Pick a spot. Where can you span or mirror depending on the technology that you've got? Right? Probably going to start over here. See what the client's saying to the switch. Right? Because this is the point that probably has the least capability of being really, really tightly locked down. It kind of depends. You can lock down where the user can't maybe mess with configurations and things like that. But this is kind of as good as any place else to start. What is coming into the switch? Right? And then you have to start looking at what's breaking down. You just got to start getting some packets in a couple places. If we separate some of those functions out and they're in all kinds of different servers, which is entirely possible, same thing. Pretty much just got to find a point, just, grab a trace. What can you see? Do you see anything? Not seeing anything is a good thing. All right? If I'm looking right here, or even here through the access point, if I'm not seeing any of this initial user stuff, I'm not seeing some initial ink packets, the problem is at the client. Done. Well, not necessarily. Okay? Because what fires off this ink to say this is who I am is the switch port has to be configured for 802.1x to basically say, who are you? It throws the little tickle out. It opens up the little door. Hello, you want in? All right? So if you don't see anything, it's still going to be a switch. But we're going to have the desktop team start first, right? And we're going to quickly run a show run, show config, display current, whatever it is. We're going to look on our switch and see, user port, done. Right? And if not, by the time the desktop team perhaps gets there, because it takes a little time for everything that happened in the system, when we get our switch port fixed, then things are working. Ticket closed. You found the issue, sorry. And they're going to be just as happy at the end, right? How many is that your job, regardless? We're very close to your job. You're probably going to get smacked into it, one way or the other. All right? So it's still okay thing. But just because you don't see something here doesn't mean that it's this fault. Okay? It could be the switch. Could be. No, never the switch. Switches are always good. If I'm seeing stuff here, all this basic handshake is okay. But if I start looking over at the authentication server, I look on this side and I see no packets. After seeing this guy being challenged and given his initial ID, and I don't see anything going on with the radius server, it's the switch config. It means somebody forgot to tell the switch who the radius server is, what their IP address is. Oops. Okay, another really quick fix, show radius. Right? Oops. We put that, try again. Right? And by this time, it's probably already working. Life is good. If I'm seeing stuff go up but not come back. Oh, that's my favorite one. Hey, the network's done. I got packets in, packets out. Woohoo! Must be in the server. Well, it could be. Up at server, it can be numerous things. One of the quickest, easiest to find out is look in the event log, or the radius log, rather, and in Microsoft World, it'd be for the event. It's an NPS. It's about 15 layers deep to get to it. As opposed to IAS, it was really easy. It could very well be up on the radius server. It doesn't know who's supposed to talk to it. Okay? Just because I'm a switch on the network and I'm sending you a packet radius server, the radius server said, I don't know you. You see this packet come in from this person. It doesn't care what's in that packet. If that switch isn't defined on the radius server, the radius says, I don't know you, and tosses it. Okay? There's no other errors. It's all at the server at this point. So there's no return packet. Good, bad, or indifferent. Radius server doesn't say, I don't know you, and send back that kind of a packet. It just drops. I don't know you. I'm not speaking to you. You got cookies. I'm not talking to you. Right? I'm not doing that. So, from the network perspective, life was good. The packets didn't lie. Well, omission of packets, though, right? It did tell us something. So if I get the basics down, where the client's configured, the switch is configured here, the switch and the radius server are configured for communication, that is generally the large part of the battle. After that, it's going to be probably either some sort of policy configuration in the authentication server. It could be some sort of credential information, bad username, password, incorrect password, over at the database, the user database. In our case, I'm going to use the Microsoft Windows 2008 server as example, Active Directory, right? I got something wrong over there. But I'm going to get some kind of a message over here in Radius now. My credentials were incorrect. Active Directory is going to tell NPS, no, bad username and password. It doesn't tell you which, actually, right? It just says bad username and password. But that's something. What Radius will tell the switch is, no, access reject. You did not pass the policy. Okay, that told me something. So the network team says, not my problem. All right? But that's an issue between the authentication server and the database, basically. And if you really can decode some of those messages, some are relatively easy and some aren't. But a bad username password, okay, it's here or it's here, right? Somebody didn't remember their password, or this guy wasn't configured correctly, whichever, okay? But it's not the stuff between, it's those two far points. But it's our chance to prove it, and at least we get a message to do that. We get a trace. All the trace tells us is access reject. Got to go back to the radius server, look at the radius log. Oh, that user ID, it failed username and password. I can also have things in my radius policies that say, well, it has to be a connection on Ethernet, wired, an 802.3 connection. If it came as an 802.11 connection through wireless, no, I won't allow that user to authenticate to the network because they're in a really unsecure environment. How many think wireless is unsecure? Well, come on. How many run encrypted wireless and think it's secure? For how many seconds? Right? It's more secure than not, but it's not really very secure. Well, it's not considered the most secure, right? So it could be engineering users. No, folks. We're not letting you run a wireless into the getting access to the engineering resources. You've got to be on the wired part of the network. So I may have that policy up here. But the phone call is, hey, it's Jeff from engineering. I can't get on the network. So now the troubleshooting, flow chart has to read, where are you? I'm on the campus. Huh, great. Thank you, Jeff. Where are you? Oh, I'm out in the rotunda area outside. It's just a beautiful day. Oh, you're on the wireless network. Yes. I'm in the rotunda outside. Oh, in wireless, you don't get access to the engineering stuff. What? Security policy. That's a layers 8, 9, and 10 thing to go resolve, all right? But the network security worked. I had that test. So everything was actually operating correctly. But somewhere along the line, somebody said, network team, we got a problem on the network. Well, no, we don't. Everything is working as designed. Now we have to deal with, a security policy has to be modified for whatever reason. And maybe it's real engineering, we don't care. Not on wireless. Get back inside and do your job at your desk. Or in the lab, or wherever it might be. For any kind of user. I'm just kind of using that as an example. So it could have been a policy that failed, but it was a correct policy. It could be a policy failed because of incorrect, right? Duh. I checked token ring on the box instead of Ethernet. Oops. Was that the network fault? No. Right? It was a policy configuration issue. And you have to, again, decipher a little bit more closely what the error message on the radius server said to let you know that that was a connection policy issue. Okay, it wasn't bad username, password, wasn't bad location. You can actually see the packet came in as from an 802.11 source, but the policy, the connection policy says, nope, got to be wired, got to be 802.3. Okay, but whose fault was it? Network. Whose real fault was it? Nobody. The culprit was a bad policy or a policy that might be different from the user's expectation. That's like layer 8, 9, and 10 speed. Right? From our perspective, hey, it's not our fault, we don't care. Somebody else has to deal with that. What else could be a fault in here? There could actually be, let's say we had a connection policy. It could be a network policy itself in the configuration of NPS that says, okay, I have to be on 802.3 pass, I have to have the username, password pass. In Microsoft's NPS, I can actually set a time and day. Oh wait, you're coming in at 1 a.m. on Saturday? No. Okay, so the policy condition put in a fail, but it was only because the policy had a match that was not happy or that was not in line with the user's expectation. Right? But from a network perspective, the network was not at fault. From a policy configuration, it was not at fault. There was no fault per se. It was just doing what it had been told. And again, some of those may have to be in line. How many users expect the network to be up no matter when they are there? Right? How many have policies in place about you can't be on the network at certain times? Not including outages. Okay? And how is that more typically controlled? You can't be on the network because we won't let you in the front door. Right? Your card key didn't work at 1 a.m. on Saturday. You can't get in here to be on my network. But what happens if that person tailgated behind somebody else? Because nobody ever tailgates their card key access to do that. Especially when the sign says no tailgating. Right? Oh, but that's okay. I know the custodial staff's in there at 1 a.m. and I need somebody to get me a file, and I have to be friends with one of the custodian folks. So I gave him a flash drive, asked him to go in, go to my computer, log in with my credentials. Now, okay, that's a whole other series of things, right? We can't deal with that. Okay? We can't deal with that one. So that one, oops, that's a layer 0, right? That's going to happen no matter what we put in place, right? At that stage of the day. We can keep layering on those stuff. But it's the troubleshooting this. Our first inclination is to grab some traces. All right, maybe we look at the switch status, maybe we try to do a few other things. But we're going to probably go grab a trace really quick and find out what's going on. And from a trace perspective, life is good. That's probably going to be well more than 50% of the time the traces are going to be good. Okay, I'm going to get accept messages, or I'm going to get reject messages. And the rejects, gee, I don't know what's in that. I don't get any data from Radius down to the switch that says why Radius said no. I got to go look in the Radius policy. How many network teams have access to the server stuff? Depending on the organization, like none. When you go and say, hey, sysadmins, I need an admin level password, they're like, what? Mine? Right? I'll give you modified user, but don't even begin to say that keyword super or admin. I'm not. In fact, I'm over here. Please look over there while I type in my password real quick. Right? I don't care how you give me the data. I just need the data. Well, this isn't where the network problem is. But you know what? The packets don't lie. You said reject. Not my fault. Network's up. I can log in on that port. I'm in. So I need the event log out of Radius to find out what's going on. So, my system's not coming up. I may have a plan B. Anyway, this is what I was going to try to show. A switch with a couple of different devices, a phone working. Actually, I was going to have 2 phones on here, so authenticating different ways. One phone, the Mitel, is going to authenticate with MD5, and the other telephone is just going to authenticate based on its MAC address. At one point, I'll have the phone plugged in, or a computer plugged into the phone, so you can see that that port actually is live in 2 VLAN. And then I'd also then just have a computer and a regular port. I'm running Windows 2008 with NPS, Active Directory, all these good things. Happens to be an HP switch. It works with 3 comms. It works now HP. It works with Cisco's. It works with who's the Extreme. Brocade Foundry, basically anybody in the enterprise class world certainly will support this functionality. Now, of course, we have traces, right? I was kind of given a word of advice. Jeff, don't do your thing without any traces. You know, they'll like run you out. So anyway, we have traces, right? Because the packets don't lie. So here's the things we care about. All right, the first thing that happened when that port went live with that Windows XP computer plugged in, the switch said, who are you? Speaking layer 2, no protocols, no IPs, IPX, AppleTalk, nothing. Okay, we got nothing but layer 2 here. They opened up that little sliver of a door and said, who are you? The switches, or the device is sitting over there with this, and the supplicant fired up and running, and basically says, oh, I'm Jeff. And the switch says, cool, hang on, I'll be right back. Switch goes to Radius and says, hey, Jeff wants to get online. And Jeff who? Right? Radius gives it the switch. Switch says, Jeff who? Right? I give my password. Radius, switch sends it to Radius. And Radius comes back and says, good to go, access, accept. And the switch goes to the port. Welcome to the club. Opens up the trap door and the sky is clear, the birds are chirping. It's a good day, right? And now I can get an IP address. My DHCP will fire and go all the way through the switch. Go back to DHCP, I get an address, and I'm on. Woohoo! Life's good. That's a good day, right? A not so good time is it failed. Here's our trace. All right? We did all of our normal stuff. Who am I? This is me. Prove it. And when Radius came back and said, no, I don't like something, switch, access reject. All right? And the switch effectively passes an EAP component saying, sorry, and the trapdoor stayed down. And effectively what happens then is the supplicant will fire off again and say, hey, I'd like to get on the network. Well, prove who you are, right? And it starts the whole process. In the case of Windows operating system, XP with Service Pack 1 Vista and Windows 7, by default, you get that authentication tab under the network properties. It's the middle tab of 3. All right? When you go turn on 802.1x, there's another feature in there that you can say either use the Windows login credentials or not use it. If you choose to not use the Windows login, which requires a 2-step process to get into the network, you get the little bubble that pops up. You know, the little message bubble that pops up wherever you get on the right-hand side of the taskbar, wherever that's at. Okay? And it comes up, and in Windows XP, it came up just long enough to basically read it and disappears. And you can't force it back up. You have to wait, and it seems like forever. Vista I didn't play with. Windows 7, it pops back a little bit faster. And it actually stays a little longer. Gives you time to say, to get onto the network, you may need to do other things. You know, it's one of those kind of sentences. The bottom line is, click here. And it brings you up a password and username password prompt to get in. So, we don't know why it failed. But from a network perspective, if you look at that, where's the failure point? Or, come on, a little louder, I'm hard hearing. Supplicant?
Or anything.
Probably not, okay, because Radius said fail. Okay, so the supplicant is communicating. Okay, so the supplicant is not the issue necessarily. Again, this is also what I call like nailing Jello to the wall. Depending on how long and hard you cook the Jello, will just depend on how long it sticks, right? But eventually it will ooze off, or it may chunk off.
You don't know where the failure is until you validate whether or not you can successfully authenticate against the Radius server with another set of credentials.
I'll accept that. Absolutely.
If you can authenticate with another set of credentials, then it was user failure.
Absolutely. Now I can also go into the switch log, or excuse me, the Radius log, and actually I might be able to further define it without even another test. Nothing wrong with another test, absolutely. I could go in here and find out the failure was because the EAP choice at the client did not match the policy in the Radius server. So from that perspective, who was at fault? Two things.
Can we just blame Microsoft for that?
No arguments. I'm a network guy. It's always there. It's never here. That's the way I'll better answer. It's never here. It's always somewhere else, right? But I'm never always right. But I'm always never wrong. So we don't know yet. Just the trace alone doesn't tell us enough. But it does tell us a lot. It tells us that the switch to Radius communications are great. They're okay. It tells us that the client to the switch is great. So we actually know communications is all completely set up correctly. The failure is somewhere either at, if the error message is wrong EAP over here, that means the policy here and how it's configured at the end don't match. And again, remember that the client does not talk to the Radius server, period. So whatever the client is doing, it's repackaged in a communication from the switch to Radius. So even the type of EAP that we're set up for out here, the supplicant configuration, that version of EAP speed, the switch passes it through. So I have to have a policy and my clients. So if this is NPS, and you fire up that Mitel phone that can only be configured for MD5, and my only choices out of the cardboard box here are PEAP, TLS, and TTLS. I'm a server guy. They said MD5. I don't see MD5. Well, I'll just set up PEAP. Maybe it'll work. Right? Server guy, we're done. Network team, we're done. Desktop team, we're done. Let's try it. Throw the switch. Came up, didn't work. Not for the phone. We take your example, perfect. The PC on the other end of the phone, authenticated. So the switch port is open for the PC, but not for the phone. Voice problem. Right? That's when everybody's going to go, whoo, voice team. who called the push team in to fix it, right? And then we further have to look at, wait a minute. We know what the packets are saying. We kind of have an idea. It's got to be, from that perspective, either a client config. It's not that the supplicant's not on. The supplicant, or a supplicant, is on because the switch talked to it in that layer 2.
Actually, I was just thinking that the Mitel needs Mitel's got to fix their stuff so it doesn't rely on MD5 because we want to kill them.
Agreed, and I think that's why Microsoft took MD5 out of their default NPS. Like I say, you can reg edit it in. And it took me all about 5 seconds to Google that and hit a gazillion hits.
Well, the Chinese loved that they hacked that years ago, and they're like, thanks, they opened up MD5.
Exactly. Well, and Mitel and Cisco and Brincom and most of the major VoIP players are now adding an intelligent, a PEEP level or TLS level supplicant. Okay, but it's more work to make that certificate stuff work.
They can't just do it. I'm not enough. They don't have an SHA version of that.
No, not that I've seen anyway. Okay, and I'm absolutely not the expert on that. It's just in my limited level travels, I have not seen anything. But those are some of the things you deal with. Okay, so the fail, we don't know why. We've got to go look somewhere else. Okay, the quickest next best place to troubleshoot after a trace is at the event log, or the radius log, whatever that's called. Okay, however you get to it. That will tell you more stuff. It may not give you the answer, but hopefully it gives you the next step, the next place to start looking at. So here's one, a successful authentication. So we've got our radius accept message here, and I also assigned a VLAN out of radius. I told the switch, put that port in VLAN 220. So the switch has to have a VLAN 220 configured. That port is not statically assigned to that VLAN, however. It's assigned to some other VLAN. Actually, I put ports under 802.1x control in a VLAN that goes nowhere. I call it the dead VLAN, VLAN 99. That's Jeff's way of doing it. I'll put all 802.1x ports statically untagged in VLAN 99. That way, VLAN 99 has no IPs, no DHCP helper, no routing, no nothing. You get nowhere in VLAN 99. Black hole VLAN, exactly. And don't leave unused ports or ports that you want part of that authentication in VLAN 1 if you use VLAN 1 for anything, right? Which is the default setting for ports. Varying ways. Anyways, just to show that in this message, everything was good, and I just happened to assign my VLAN from the radius server. It's part of a standard. It's not a specific proprietary by anybody. Now this is a fun one. Authentication. The message is access accept. It came back from radius. However, the user didn't get an IP address. The user's still stuck at 169 whatever. When you go look on the switch, you find out that port is still in VLAN 99. What? How can that be? All the communications were great. Radius said good to go. Oh, look and see what VLAN I assigned it to. 221. That switch didn't have 221 on it. If you look at the switch log, then you find out radius said good to go, but it assigned a VLAN, and you have to translate this into regular English. Radius told me to put into a VLAN that I don't have configured. VLAN 221 wasn't defined on the switch. The switch left the trapdoor in place. The user's not happy. Oh, wait a minute. It's not a network problem. Whose fault is it? Okay, we've got to find out. Was VLAN 221 the correct VLAN ID from Radius, or is it an incorrect? It's hard to say. You know, if it's a correct VLAN, then oops, I messed up. I didn't put VLAN 221 on the switch. If that should have been VLAN 220, then that means it's a policy issue. Okay? So the packet tells us a lot, but the packet unto itself doesn't necessarily tell us everything. If you go look at the radius log is going to go, woo, life is great. They're in. Switch, open the door. All right, so if I look at this, generically I see access accept. I'm going, right, the problem. Look a little bit further. Oh, wait a minute. At the same timestamp of this reply packet coming through, or within milliseconds later, I said, oops. Oh, gotta go back and look at the packet. Look a little bit further down and find out, oh, it's the VLAN ID. So I had 3 places, well, 2 at a minimum. I needed a trace, and I need to look at the switch log. And now I can correlate, okay, 221, right or wrong? It's a policy to switch thing now. Okay, we have to go deal with that. The packet didn't lie, you know. The policy was set up, all communications were good, but we just had to deal with the rest of the story, that last little tidbit. Here was an attempt, somebody tried to authenticate. Well, the bottom line is the supplicant wasn't turned on. So what's basically happening is you're getting a continual switch saying, who are you? Never getting a reply. And after a little bit of time, the switch said, failed. It never sent anything back to the radio server. The radio server is going to have no events on this. This is all down at the switch. But it's relatively easy to go. Wait a minute. If I'm turned on to 802.1x, the supplicant's supposed to be enabled. It's not. Now it's a desktop support. Right? So I forgot to turn the supplicant on. So we have to deal with that. But at least we know where the problem is. And I didn't have to go very far to determine that particular piece of it, to trace a fair amount. Especially if I've got others that are working. That's always the classic, right? If a whole big block of people aren't working, you've got to find that common point. It could be a common point switch. It could be, you know, I rolled out a new service pack and somebody forgot to turn on the 802.1x, whatever it might be. Now, to look at some of these issues from the radius log perspective, in the case of Microsoft's NPS, I can come up here, I find out that NPS basically said no, and unfortunately, in NPS, I don't really get a good indicator to tell me it's the wrong E. I just basically get a network policy mismatch, a network policy error. So I have to spend a little bit more time trying to decode what's going on. I can potentially find out in the packets between the client and the switch what EAP is enabled, what EAP protocol is speaking across, and then go back into the policy, figure out what EAP version is set up. That's a tough one. It just takes a little bit more work, a little bit more manual work in trying to determine. But it can be relatively easy to rule out what it's not. And that's always the quickest thing we're trying to find, right? What is not the problem? You know, you draw the picture and you draw, okay, here's communications and here's flow. Here's the things that are working. They're not the problem. Where's the failure point? It's not always going to be crystal clear. Actually, in Microsoft IAS, the Internet Authentication Service, which was Radius in Windows 2000 and 2003, it told you if there was an EAP mismatch. It didn't tell you what EAP came in and what EAP it's expecting, but it told you it was an EAP problem. So it was a very quick, easy, you can look at the policy, I want P. You look at a trace or back at the client, it's set up to TLS. There it is. Why aren't they matching? This is one of my favorites. I'm getting a hard-coded error message. The bottom line is, somebody talked to me from this address. I don't know them. The radio says, that's it. Done. I'm not replying back to you. I don't know you. Don't bother me. And it will continue to do that forever until you go add that as what's called a radius client. So who is a radius client? From Radius's perspective, who's the client? The switch. Okay? Why is that important? Well, because depending on which Radius server platform you buy, they have a finite number of clients. For instance, standard Windows Server supports 50 Radius clients. If you have 500 users and 15 switches, are you okay? Yes. Because who's the clients? The switch. 15 switches are talking. I've got a limit of 50. Done. It's not end user seats. They never talk. Okay, from that perspective, from the Radius perspective. So there can be little nuances like that. A really quick, easy thing, right? Packet went out from the switch, nothing came back. Whoa. That's almost a clear indication of the packet trace. Oops, something on the server is not configured correctly. Could be just a wrong IP or a completely missed IP address. All right. If in Radius you can also have what they call a secret key or a secret or a shared secret. It's termed different things. It's effectively a password to set up a minor level of encryption between the client and Radius. If you mistype the keys, you'll actually get some communications. It just won't get everything correct. But you will get a flow. It just won't be correct. So you have to kind of work on that one. It's not always crystal clear. This is a crystal clear. What's the problem? Packet left the switch never heard back from radius. It's an easy choice. Server guys, go look in radius, look in the clients, is my switch defined? Well, I don't know. Which one do you want? Go look in the errors, it'll tell you. That's the one I want. Now here's a great one. If this is a switching router configuration with multiple VLANs and multiple IP addresses, by default, which IP address of the switch sends its message up to radius? I'll give you a quick answer. There's not a default answer. It could be any of the IP addresses on that switch / router. So that means, well, I've got 15 VLANs, or a minimum of 15 IP addresses, not even counting subnetted IPs in those multiple VLANs. Any of those IP addresses can talk. If I've got 5 out of the 15, and any of those other 10, that's the error message. So this is a some things work, some things don't work scenario. So then you want to go find on your switch, oh, can I source a particular IP address and speaking to radius? Most of the switches can do that, but that may be a configuration you have to add. Or you tell the radius guys, oh, I need 15 IP addresses. Well, if I've got 15 switches with 15 IP addresses and a 50 client limit in radius, oops, maybe I better source a single IP out of that switch to talk to radius. So those are potential things that you have to look at. It's like where is the exact problem? It's not always 100% apparent. But this tells you this address talked, wasn't defined. Very easy. A connection policy. In NPS, there are 2 levels of configuration to support radius policies. You have a connection policy and then you have the network policy. Connection policy deals with some fundamentals. Just kind of call them layer 2. Make it really easy. That's where you can define, I want only Ethernet packets. I only want them maybe in this time of day. There's some other configurations that you can do in there. But that's the quickest, easiest. You can make a generic, I don't care where from, connection, or I can go in and do some very fine-tune. In this particular case, the failure was, literally, I'd selected token ring, I'm connected on Ethernet. The packet went through, it went through the policies, and it said, whoa, I got no token ring support here. I see you. The switch told me you're coming in on 802.5, not 802.3. You're not going to get on. So radius sends back an access reject. I can't tell from that packet trace what the problem was. I got to go look in the event log and find out, oh, it's a connection policy. What? Which connection policy did it fail? Well, you got to look through all the connection policies and find out. It doesn't tell you which one it tangented on. Okay? You just have to manually look through them and find this out. Here's one that the network policy was the fail point. In this particular case, I was not in can't remember what I was, but my network component didn't pass. My network policy test didn't pass. So again, access reject came from server. Switch did its job, left the trapdoor in place. I can't do anything else with the trace. I've got to go look at the server, look at the radius log, and try to decipher. Well, at least I know where to go look here. It's somewhere in this network policies. Now, depending on how many I have, I've got to go through and find it. I sincerely apologize that I couldn't show this stuff. It's very upsetting. My policies, I have things like it's got to be on Ethernet. It's got to be within certain Windows groups. I had another that said it had to be wireless only as opposed to wired only. So I had a couple of different tests. So the end of the story is, from this week's perspective, it's not all about the captures. This gives us a quick and dirty, where can I go look fast? Prove that it's not the network, right? Which is generally a nice thing. And I'm going to have to go look other places. I might have to look at switch logs. Might need to look at the radius logs. I might even need to look down at the client, but probably not. Right? The last thing I really want to do is have the client go into control panel, the admin, go to event viewer. We've lost him. Right? We lost him after stringing through after control panel. We're like, huh? Thank you. We'll do some other way. So we'll send somebody by with them. Right? No offense to them. It's just we don't really want to bug them. We might not want them to get places they shouldn't be anyway. Right? So, but you may have to look down there. But it's typically going to be captures, switch log is probably like the third. Captures and the radius logs are going to be your 2 primary places to look. and depending on what information you get, at least kind of point you in the closer to the right direction to resolve the particular issues. So, that was it. Hopefully that was helpful for you. To get into these environments, the troubleshooting is just absolutely mind-wrecking sometimes because there's so many different things involved to make it work. When it works, it's awesome. When it fails, it's almost terrible because it takes a little bit of time. But it's just one of those, the more you do it, the more you look at it, the easier it gets. At least that's what I've read somewhere. So, thanks for coming at the end of the day and staying over. I really appreciate it, and have a good rest of the week.